Welcome to another episode of Golden Ticket Connections. I'm your host, Kason, and I'm with my co-host, Mohammed.
All right, guys.
And today we have a special guest today, Jason Bown, and he is a Director of IT Enablement at JE Dunn Construction. Jason, thanks for coming on.
Great. Thank you very much, Kason and Mohammed. Glad to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we just wanted to start off and kind of understand your career journey. So what was your career journey? Do you want to start off with where it all became or where it all started to where you're at currently?
Absolutely. So I have a little bit of a unique one. Some people out there might resonate with it. So um, it started as actually a kid. Got my first Apple IIc computer, and the first thing I did was took it apart. Freaked out my grandma and my dad when they got it. But that's where I really sparked that interest in technology and understanding how things work. Um, I got my first job as a lifeguard, actually. So I spent 3 years doing lifeguarding over the summers in high school. Um, that's where you learn to work with people, work with a manager, work in high pressure situations, um, where you actually had to save a couple lives and help some pretty injured people. So
Oh,
you
my.
learn a little bit. You learn a little bit of that. Um, then I landed in, my dad put me into trade school for chemical plant operations. So thankfully, I wasn't too rebellious, and I just said, sure, that sounds great. So I went into that. It was very difficult, high-end chemistry, instrumentation, electronics theory, a lot of hard classes, calculus with math and stuff like that. And but it was very pointed and very specific. It was a feeder school to the Idaho National Engineering Laboratory out in Idaho, about the center of Idaho. So it was a nuclear facility out in the middle of the desert. So a lot of distance between that and a lot of people in case something went really bad. And so
Mm.
it impacted the blast radius, as they call it, was protected. So uh, I started into chemical plant operations under the nuclear side, so I learned and trained how to um, process nuclear fuels, spent nuclear fuels from submarines, melt it down chemically, extract out U-235 uranium to make new fuel rods for either nuclear submarines or for power plants. Um, Sounds like a fantastic and cool process until I was told it was shut down in 1960 something and it'll never run again. So you'll never really do what you have trained and got certified up to do. So that doesn't sit very well with my brain. I like to work and do stuff. So I said, well, what am I actually going to do? Well, there were decommissioning a lot of the cells and the sites in that area. So I kind of termed it a nuclear janitor. So I would put on radiation suits, and I had people up at the top of what we called a cell that you would go down into, and they were health physics technicians. They would make sure my breathing air apparatus was working, and I wasn't in there too long, and my temperature was good. While I would take down yellow trash bags, really high end um, paper towels and some Windex, and I would wipe down equipment to get rid of as much contamination, radioactive contamination, as I could, because they were going to cut it all out and take it out and then fill the whole cell with concrete and be done. So I did that for a little while. I'll stress a little while before I ventured into some other places and made some relationships in the utilities division of the plant. So the utilities division was completely opposite of what I was doing. So it was non-nuclear and it was running 24/7. So this was emergency power, breathing air, demineralized water, steam was the big one. So because steam was used throughout a chemical plant in various processes. And so I moved over
Wow.
to that division. I was still working 12-hour shifts for 4 days at a time. So it was a pretty grueling schedule. I'd work 4 days, noon to midnight. I'd get 4 days off. Then I'd work 4 days, midnight to noon, and get 4 days off. So Sleep cycle was completely destroyed,
Yeah.
but I was okay. I was a pretty young guy. It didn't really matter. I was okay. Got married and had our first child. That's when the sleep cycle really started to matter. And my desire to be a present husband and father. So this is where I started to learn that really stressful piece of life where you are torn between you need to pay the bills and you need to provide for your family, but you also need to be with your family and be in a marriage with a child and things like that. So I started to think about what would my next move be in order to be more present with my family. And after a while of working in utilities, I started to see an opening in the instrumentation division. Now, this is where I also kind of fractionally was thinking of, well, maybe I can make some extra money on the side. And I started a custom PC build business at home. So I wanted to learn more about technology, even more than I'd had. And, I'm dating myself, but the internet didn't exist. So it was all books. And so I used those midnight hours where I was on the midnight shift or working on the weekends. I could get my job done in about 2.5 to 3 hours of a 12-hour shift. So there wasn't, you're monitoring and you're responding to stuff, but it was not very demanding from a time perspective. So I read things like the DOS 6.22 manual cover to cover a couple times. I had access to a computer where I could apply some of my thinking to scripting or something like that and learn things. And then this amazing thing called the internet came about, and you could go to FTP sites. You could download executable games from universities around the world. And so I dabbled in that a little bit. And then I got a new job as an instrumentation technician, as a junior instrument tech. So we had about 16,000 instruments around the plant that were used to monitor various things, in the nuclear side and the non-nuclear side. And our job was to calibrate them to make sure they were in tolerance and they were working properly. And but I was a junior tech, so I went from a senior operator making that hourly wage to a junior instrument tech. So the sacrifice was the wage. So I dropped down a good amount of hourly pay in trade for 4 10-hour days. So predictable schedule during the day. It was 7 to 5. And so I could be with my family. I could be present. But now the pressure's on. Now I need to get my wage back up because now we've stripped our budget. This is where budgeting with your spouse comes in really, really important. You need to be on the same page on money inside of a marriage partnership. Otherwise, unneeded stress enters very quickly. So we were able to adjust our budget. It was tight, but it worked. And so we wanted to take some stress off that budget. So I started to ask the questions of, well, what does it take to get promoted from a junior instrument tech to a senior? And that's where they said, well, we've never had anybody hired as a junior instrument tech. So we don't have a curriculum to do this. And so, that was that blank kind of pause of quiet awkwardness of, well, I'm not going to say, oh, well, and you're probably not going to say, we'll get right on that. So I'm kind of an out of the box thinker too. And so I proposed, well, why don't I create my own certification route? If you don't have one and you don't have another person on your staff to do it and you're busy with other stuff. And that's where this training executive kind of looked at me and said, you want to make your own curriculum? I said, yeah. And he was like, okay, I'm going to do this, but I get to make the test. That wouldn't be very smart if you made your own test. I'm like, totally understand. So I went down that route, helped create that curriculum, and he still had me write some of the questions of the test. And I took a pretty pragmatic approach to it. And got certified back up to a senior instrument tech. Okay, so now I've got my wage back up to where it was. So a little pressure off of the income side. So things are going pretty good, but now I'm kind of getting antsy on like, what is it I'm doing? Where do I want my career to go? Right. I mean, I'm early 20s, right? I started at this place at 19. And so now I'm a few years into it. I've done nuclear, I've done non-nuclear, I've done instrumentation now. Well, there was a guy inside of our group that ran the database for all those 16,000 instruments. And he created a custom program that would, give us basically for the instrument techs, it would give us our work for the day. Here's the 127 instruments that need to go get calibrated, and the boss would divvy out all of the things, and we would go do our thing for the week. Really, there wasn't a ton of, now that I look backwards, it was a really simple kind of workflow. We would get our jobs at the beginning of the week, and that's just what we would do for the next 4 days. It was kind of great. You knew exactly what you're doing, and you just go do it. Well, I learned this from this guy, his programming, and I would ask questions here and there, and I became very interested. And I went to my boss and said, "Hey, I want to learn more about that." And he was like, "We would love to have a backup person support him, because he's the only one. I mean, if this guy dies, gets hit by a bus or something, no one understands what he does. So it'd be great." And then he warned me and gave me a caution and said, "We've had 4 people try to be a backup to this guy, and they all quit that type of function and went back into just instrument tech work." And I was like, "Why?" And it was like, "Well, he's a really hard guy to work with." And they didn't like him. And so I was like, okay, I'm young, little naive. I got pretty thick skin, but I'm like, I'll give it a try. And I started to learn some stuff. This was when Windows NT4 was coming out, and I was pretty good with it. And he hated Windows. He was a Linux guy. He was a database guy. And so he was like, I like this. This is going to work out pretty good. And then in one meeting, I asked a question of him, and I don't even remember what the question was, but I remember that he pretty much steamrolled me in the meeting, right? I mean, he just berated me, and I was kind of stunned. And meeting was over and stuff like that. And I went into my boss's office, and he goes, that is why the other 4 quit. And I was like, well, I mean, yeah, he got on me and he made a fool of me in front of everybody. But, I'm more curious as to why. Like, why did he react like that? And, but I continued on, and I found out that he just didn't like to repeat himself. He was a very, very smart guy, but he did not like if he told you something or taught you something, he didn't like to say it again. And I was like, once I made that realization, I thought, well, this is going to be easy. I just took a notepad every time I sat down with him. And whenever he was talking, I was taking notes. And he really respected that. And so the relationship between him and I grew. And one time I actually remember him asking me, "Why do you take so many notes?" And I was like, "Because you don't like to say things twice. Trust me, I know." I was in a meeting with you and you pretty much blasted me. And he kind of laughed, and he was like, "You're pretty sharp. I like you." And he was like, "And you're going to do all the Windows stuff, because I don't like to do that stuff." So our relationship grew, and really that's where I learned a lot from him. He was one of, I would kind of term him my first technology mentor. I learned some of the most basic things that he had spent his lifetime learning in very, I'm like 22 or 23 at the time, I can't remember. And this guy's like 40 something, right? So he's had a good 20 years of technology even before me. So if you can think about that and how that dates things. So he's got a lot of very fundamental computing stuff. And so that job led me to an opportunity to have a discussion with a person that was actually looking to leave the IT department of the government site. And I was building a computer up that has some very proprietary components, but I knew that he had them. So rewind a little bit. remember when I was working those shift works, right?
Yeah.
I remember I had to walk through buildings to make sure that HVACs were working, right? There wasn't any pipe bursts or anything like that. Well, there was this one guy's office that was like 4 cubes big. And he had all the technology magazines and books. He had some servers running in the side. And I remember doing a little visualization exercise now that I know what that is, and sitting in his desk and going, I think I want to do this. This is what I want to do. I want to support technology for groups and things like that. So that kind of planted the seed, right? Now, fast forward, I'm building a computer. I'm doing, stuff with the instrumentation group.
Yeah.
And that computer needed something that I knew this guy had. So I reached out to him, sat down, and thinking that I was, on one of the day shifts, thinking that, it's just going to be hey, how's it going? And here's your, your HP CD-ROM drive that you need. Well, 2.5 hours later, after a long discussion, I found out he was really kind of interviewing me because he was trying to find somebody that could be out there on site to support the mechanical engineering people that he was supporting, because he wanted to go back into Idaho Falls inside the city, right, where the IT department was. There was like a security position or something open. And so not a lot of people that wanted to be clear out at the site, because I was living in Potel at the time, and it was like an 1.5-hour bus ride to go to work and an 1.5-hour bus ride back. So like we were in the middle of the desert type of thing. Now they were nice buses and stuff like that. And, that's where I started reading. I got really good at chess on the Nintendo DS, playing games like that. Well, not even the DS, the original Game Boy, the gray one. Learned how to, well, yeah, that was the first one, and played a lot of Tetris and a lot of chess. Those were the big ones. And so I get that job, and that's my first official IT job. And I learned an enormous amount from that one, right? So I'm building servers, I'm learning technologies, I'm studying all the time. And I have a little bit of, now I feel this flexibility of, if you've got a job, now you've just go do it. So sometimes it was like, yeah, I'm gonna have to work tonight and be at the site late and do something, and they are all not working. So I had this really nice environment of I could do whatever I wanted after all these engineers left. So I was building servers, I was redoing files, systems, and stuff like that. And I did that for about a year. That is where Monster.com landed on the internet. And out of curiosity, I put my resume out there, and the next day I was contacted by 3 companies. So I'd learned a very specific skill set inside the technology area. 2 of them were consulting companies on the coasts, and I really didn't want to live on the coast. And the other one was Cerner in Kansas City, Missouri, a healthcare software company. And I was like, oh, that sounds pretty interesting. Now, remember, Idaho boy that hasn't grown up in any other town, they flew me to Kansas City, gave me the red carpet treatment, took me on this awesome tour of headquarters, showed me the gym and a pool. And I was like, wow, this stuff exists for people to work. Like I can use this anytime I want. Yep, you got all this stuff. So I got hired. I was one of, I didn't even know what I was getting into, but it was a very impactful opportunity for me from a career perspective. I was one of about 15 people that were starting a new division in Cerner. Now we call it cloud computing. Back then we called it remote access. So application data services or something. Hospitals were not wanting to buy a lot of hardware and hire a lot of people to run their electronic medical record software or pharmacy division or something like that. They were tired of spending millions of dollars to do that. Cerner was on a quest to figure it out. So I was hired as the Microsoft Citrix guy to figure out that layer. There was another 2 that were figuring out networking, another couple figuring out the data center. There was business. Like it was a very small group, but it was led by one of the founders of Cerner, Paul Gora. And I learned a ton under Paul and working with this other team. And and that's where they trusted me to make some very big decisions, ones that I was not qualified to make. Like, you need to buy a couple hundred servers. Back then, this was millions of dollars. And I had to figure out the power layout, right? How many whips and amps and wattage. So this is where my schooling started to come from, started to help me from that Votech, because I understood some electrical foundational thinking and equations and stuff. And so fast forward, I spend about 7.5 years at Cerner inside their hosting company, and we grow it from one customer with about 3 or 4 users remotely in Florida to over 6 data centers, 44,000 concurrent users around the country, and expanding the practice into the UK to attach to the southern cluster of the to the healthcare system. So an enormous amount of growth. Feel incredibly blessed that I got that one. It was grueling. It was the hardest job I'd ever had. I think for the first 2 years, I was paged every single night. Paged at a pager, different than the cell phone. So, but it paid off, right? It launched my career into a direction I never thought I could go to. So now the next chapter is I was hardcore technical, right? Now I want to challenge myself. And so how would you challenge a really technical person? We're usually introverts, right? We kind of keep to ourselves. So I asked you guys, what would you think would be a really big challenge for a hardcore technical person?
Go into sales.
Sales, you nailed it. So I made a good relationship with Microsoft, and I became a technical seller in their enterprise space. This was when they had an office in Overland Park, and Microsoft is a selling machine. You either are a seller or you're a developer, right? A lot of that. I mean, I'm generalizing, but it's kind of the two big camps. And I spent 3.5 years in there. Learned a tremendous amount about relationships and how to talk to people and how to influence people and how to find problems and solve problems. I did that for a little while and got recruited by a friend of mine. So this is where I made a decision that I would caution your viewers to really think about. I made a money choice for my career. So I got thrown a bunch of money for an offer, and I went to go build another healthcare cloud from scratch. You don't get to do that very often. So that was what excited me. And they threw a bunch of money at me, and we did it. Was not the best environment. So I had to exit that one for my own health and for the health of my family. And I landed in another role selling some consulting services for a company that was great. Not a lot of stress. And one of my first customer, J.E. Dunn Construction, that when I was in Microsoft, it was my first customer meeting I went to. When I got hired, I went to lunch with my boss and my new account executive that I was paired with. And that day, like we're talking the same day I got hired, we're going to go visit J.E. Dunn Construction. So I go into the meeting, CIO, VP of services, infrastructure, like all the leaders are in there, and they're like, and this is Jason Bound. Hi, I'm Jason Bound. I have been with Microsoft for 7 hours, got a good laugh from everybody. But it sparked a really, really cool relationship between me and those leaders. And I became a trusted advisor of them. I would show up, I would ask for a cube, and I would be there for them. So when they had questions, if they needed somebody in a meeting that had Microsoft technology experience or access to people, they would pull me in. So I made myself highly, highly available to my customers, and they loved it. So now I'm selling those consulting services. I get a call from the CIO, John Jacobs at J.E. Dunn, and said, hey, I need to have breakfast with you. We need to discuss something. And so we sat down. He was making a change to relocate an acquisition that had some people in IT, and he wanted to centralize all of IT in Kansas City. He said, I don't know what that leader's going to do, but they're all in Atlanta, and there's a vice president in Atlanta. And he was like, I need you in the pipeline if you're interested. And I was like, yeah, I'm interested. I want to push myself some more. The consulting side was pretty simple. And if it's too boring or easy, I get a little antsy. So I was ready to try something new. He made the change. Nobody wanted to move. He called me up. I expect your resume in the next 15 minutes. I sent it. We negotiated, and I came on board, and that was in October of 2015. So we're now in 2025. I'm landing on my finishing my 9th year with JE Dunn, going on my 10th year. And it's been great. I've had so many opportunities to lead things that I've never led before, support, help desk, assets, infrastructure. I now run a $50 million budget, and I'm not a finance guy. But I run it so well, the CEO and CFO compliment me on the diligence and how I present the numbers and how I keep them good. So, and it's a fantastic company. Been there 100 years, very family oriented. They take care of their people. So that's my journey.
Amazing.
Well, there's a lot to unpack here.
I was trying to be, enough detail for you guys, but as fast as I could, so that you could enter and pry into it.
Yeah, you answered our questions already, so there's really nothing left for us to ask.
We can just end right now. Just kidding.
So let's go through and try to point out my favorite parts of the story.
Great.
Let's do that. Yeah. So my favorite part of the story was when 20-year-old Jason was looking through the mirror glass and saw the database guy. And it was like, that interests me. That spikes me. I want to work with that guy. Even though his bosses and leaders told him, that guy's hard. Don't do that. You're not going to like 4 guys. Don't be number 5. And he was like, no. So you went in, and so everybody who works anything, anywhere, any field, it has to at some point contact a toxic personality, whether it's manager, coworker, customer, whatever. Now, the way the person reacts or grows after that incident or after this experience determines, reflects the person himself. Now, 20-year-old Jason here took the learning opportunity, took the snap point or the kind of burst in the meeting where the guy was just like, wah, 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 for asking a question, and took it to your own advantage. Learned that, okay, why did he do that? Instead of why is he doing it? You see that it's the same question, like why did he do that and why did he do that? Like the emphasis on why did he do that and why, the emphasis there. Jason emphasis on why did he do that? And you're like, well, he doesn't like to repeat himself. Problem solved. We come in with a notebook. And I felt that turning point for your career, or for any person really, that would just take a very bad situation and turning into a brick to build his own career, his own self, his own path into whatever it grows to. That really reflects the confidence, the integrity, and of the person's mentality and roots, just really just branching out to the correct teams and places, instead of just taking a defeat and be like, yeah, it's just this, and then just run away from the problem, or probably just being upset and he yelled, I yelled, and that's that, and get fired, or even like it can be career-wise. The reason why I love this so much, because it can be career and it can be life. Like you come on and you in a spouse relationship, or what the place you live in, a family. It can, this type of example can really go on to any scenario of life. How you react to deal with a tough situation. And 20-year-old Jason, to me, just really inspires there. And I'm really trying to get to the viewers, like what I'm trying to vision here is being in a very vulnerable spot. 20-year-old Jason was really offended. He was the same as the same other 4 people. He was really like, I don't like this. I'm a very confident person of what I know. And I asked a legit question. There's no such thing as a stupid question. People just comprehend things on a different scale. And I asked, and then he burst out. And this person, I'm supposed to look at him to this status of leadership and management, and to be more oriented than I am, and to direct me into this new field that he himself has 20 years experience over me. But no, Jay, and then even with that hard situation, and because life is just not, all flowers and honey, it's not as easy. You don't expect to whatever job you get in, you just find a healthy environment with great people just wanting to lift you up to the sky. No, Jason was ready for that, of to deal with any type of person and to reflect his own self, inner self of what I'm here to achieve.
I love how you talked about the brick stacking mentality of that, and it made me reflect on that was a turning point for me, because I started to understand, and I'm a huge junkie for reading about personal improvement and leadership and those type of things. I'm always reading something about that.
Yeah.
It kind of drives my wife nuts because I got books all over and I don't finish them all. I jump between them and stuff like that. But I do think of you control what you can control, and you let everything else happen. So if I was to dig into that one in context to that experience, I couldn't control how he is going to react or what he is going to do, but I could absolutely control my reaction to it and
Yes.
what I do with that reaction. So I see so many people. If I was to get anything to your audience, I see so many people that judge and get frustrated and say, well, I'm just not going to work with that person anymore. I'll show them. There's a concept of malicious obedience. Well, that didn't work, boss. Let's, what do you want to try now? The internal dialogue of, I'm just waiting for you to fail again. And not having the true intent of leaning in and engaging and, how can I make that relationship better? Like you said, I turned that around and said, what can I control? Well, number one, I'm not going to get mad that he got mad. That doesn't help anything. So how do I help the situation? Number one, rid yourself of the negative emotion. And then number two, what can you do to fix it? Well, get a notebook and a pen. How hard was that, right? Take notes when he says something, value his words, value his knowledge, and show him that you value it. So I had a physical manifestation of the value of his knowledge when he would speak. That was miles ahead of what everybody else had tried, because they didn't do that. They were focused on his reactions and how he should be nicer and he should speak nicer and he should be kinder to the people that want to help him. Was the wrong mentality, in my opinion, and what set me apart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this was a very unique journey. You hear of people who, they study something and they go right into it after college, but for you, it wasn't like a clear, like, this is what I'm doing. It was just like a lot of being curious and really finding your passion throughout your journey.
Yep.
And something I noticed is there was a pattern throughout this journey, and it was you get hit with these barriers, and then you find a way to get through those barriers. So there's always a barrier there, and you didn't just turn around and stay where you're at, but you found a way to get past it. And I thought that was really cool. Starting out, you could have been like, you know what, I'm stuck in this position, you could feel sorry for yourself, like, man, like, I guess there's no way for me to move up from here. But you found a way to create your own opportunities. You got curious about technology and you kind of took that and ran with it. So I thought that was really cool. I saw that really you found out what you wanted in your career, which was you wanted a better schedule, you wanted to make more money, and you wanted to do something that you were passionate about. And you really found those goals and used that to fuel that progression. And yeah, I thought it was really cool. Thank you for
Well, thank you.
sharing
I
that.
appreciate that, Kason, because everyone is going to hit those walls. You're going to hit them all. And as I reflect back, I really, man, I have some compassion for, you young, people that are going through stuff. You have the opinions of billions of people in your face all the time. So I didn't have that, right? So I was able to curate a position of I really don't care. Like I don't care if you think I can or can't, right? Because I only had individual people, like you said, Muhammad. I had like 4 people that said, it's probably not a good idea. It wasn't me getting on Instagram and getting 900 dislikes and saying, oh, wow, that's making the decision for me, right? That's the
Yeah.
warning I would say is don't listen to the rest of the world because most of them, they don't know either. So, you follow what your heart says. Your gut is usually right, in my opinion, from my experience. You go for it and you get around those blockers. You find ways to do it. I think we're given, some innate ability in our brains to figure stuff out, and
Mhm.
we can do it. We can do hard things. We
Yeah.
don't have
Yes.
to ask for permission from the world if it's going to work or how to do it, right? It can be an incredible valuable source to get ideas on how, but it's so easy to go down the rabbit hole of should I? Oh,
Yeah.
that's not, I had a good idea and it felt really good, but all of these people say no. That's the danger, right? Look for ones and attach yourself to the right people and directions that will support you, not tear you down.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I like that a
Uh,
lot.
yeah. I feel
Another
that,
thing. Oh, go ahead.
I just really wanted to emphasize on one of our questions that we have here, which was what is an important skill that you've gained throughout your career? But given your amazing explanation about your whole CV, I really want to point that out for you. And it's, of course, in my opinion, so feel free to, if you have a better skill, to maybe emphasize on. But from my listening to your story, I feel that one of Jason's amazing skills that was critical to his career was him taking initiatives. Jason, you never once waited for someone to, have an opportunity on a plate of gold and be like, okay, here it is, take it and become what you want to become. And then if you ever have any issues, just come back to this golden plate and it would guide you to the mountains of Mordor or whatever. It was, it was always you, and it was always setting up the goals, and even setting the goals from the beginning wasn't always maybe your strongest instinct or choice, because with one of the most stressful kind of jobs, when you and this is kind of one of those small negatives that you encountered, but it was those bad things that we kind of mistakes that we fall into that give us a more learning opportunity than it is affecting our personality. So even but from the beginning, you always like to set the goal of where you want to go and what do you want to become, and where do you see yourself in this amount of time or this time frame, so to say. And then you would go into this role and, like Kason was saying, not let any barriers amongst your way and take the initiative. When there was no curriculum from a junior to a senior, you created your own curriculum. When you
Mhm.
wanted to learn, break into technology, you went to databases and you learned it over all hardships that you faced. And when you wanted to move into a different technology position, you were kind of creating a network opportunity. It ended up turning into an interview, and then so on and so forth.
So I appreciate that, Mohammed. One clarification I think I would make is, if you remember, I didn't know what I wanted to do out of high school. I had zero goals, right?
Yeah.
None. I was a weightlifter. I was a lifeguard. I was like, man, if I could just be buffer and get a better
Mhm.
tan and maybe make my chest look a little better, something like that, I'm happy, right? Those aren't goals.
Yeah.
So when I went into, I went to school kind of blindly, but what I learned from my grandfather taught me this, and it was, if you're going to spend time doing something, do it to the very best that you can,
Yeah.
right? I don't care what it is, and it does not matter. Even if you don't have a goal, something that somebody said, well, how do I get to this position? How do I get to this one? And I said, be a rock star at the position you're in.
Mhm.
So sometimes, a path for where you want to go is really messy and unknown. You can set a goal, but to get to that goal, you might take 5 different detours to get back to where you want to go. So it's okay to not even, in my opinion, it's okay to not even have a goal early on. but find like, what are things that you want to learn and experience, and then have the courage to get into there. And then once you're in there, work like crazy to be the best you can at what you're doing. Like pour yourself into it, heart, mind, and soul, and you will get value out of it. And it will open other doors when you do your best. That's what I found out, is other doors open. Because I could see other people that some of my peers and friends, they didn't have a lot of opportunities that I did, even with college degrees that I didn't get, because they were coasting in their jobs. They didn't put themselves in and like, hey boss, is there anything I can take off your plate? I can see that you're stressed about this. Is there something I can go learn or do to help? Just asking those questions, because your manager is a person too, right?
Yeah.
They have stresses, they have stuff. Like if they can see that you are a go-getter and you get things done, that's the other thing. You got to get things done. You can't just be an eager beaver and go go take on stuff. You got to deliver. And that takes effort and time and consistency and a mindset of not perfection, but making sure that it's held to your standard before you go out, and make your standard high. Like your quality of output will be seen, recognized, and talked about in other meetings that you're not in. And that's where doors open.
Yes.
Yeah. I like that a lot. I was recently listening to a podcast, and kind of like how you mentioned, be the best in your position, and work really hard at it, even if you're not sure if that's something you want to keep doing long term.
Yep.
In the podcast, I can't remember who it was, but they're saying to look at management, the people around you that are above you, and see what their skill sets are. And if you don't have those skill sets, start working on those. And then also add value. Go gain a new skill set, and that's kind of something that you did. And that's something that, viewers can do if they feel like they're stuck, or they don't know, where to go from here. Just the guy mentioned, he said, each year find a skill set and work on it that whole year. And that can add a lot of value to, your work, and it can also open up more doors.
Oh, I can confirm that 100%, Case. And that's what I've done my entire life. I just finished a book this morning that was The Myth of Multitasking. So, it's just another feather of understanding a concept that I hear a lot of people around me say. And then how do I make myself more efficient and effective? But how do I help other people around me do the same thing? Look for that servant mentality. How can I help you? Right? I'm on this podcast, Case, and you asked me. I want to, you're trying to build a following and stuff like that. And I'm hoping that I can help you, right? Giving back that service, always looking to help other people, always opens doors too.
Yes.
Thank you. Awesome. And so I guess to move forward, would you mind kind of telling us about your position? Like, what is, what does a director of IT enablement do?
Sure. Yep. So inside of JE Dunn, my position right now, I've had several, but we'll focus on what I do right now. So enablement inside of JE Dunn IT department, which is where I work. I work directly with the CIO and peer senior leaders. So there's 7 of us that report to the CIO, and I make sure and hold that group accountable to the most important things that we need to get done. I manage all financial operations. So I manage the financial plan, the budget, and all of the components that go in there. So the creation of the budget, the approval from the CEO and the CFO, the setting it up, the getting it into operations for the year, making sure that invoices are getting charged to the right places. And, I have them do it, but I teach them along the way to make sure everything is going well. I'm also responsible for the IT operating model. So how we work inside of IT. So the platform, we use Atlassian, And we put in Jira and Jira Service Management, Confluence, and Atlassian Guard. So I'm a technology guy by heart, right? So I understand architectural principles and things like that. So those things, right? I'm pulling on all of that stuff and helping to design a really good platform. We've ran it for a year. It's been fantastic. We're expanding it and maturing it right now. So I'm helping how IT gets stuff done better. Project and portfolio management we're introducing. So I help lead some of those and lead the teams that do it. Governance and metrics. So more of a decision framework of how do I go do this or how do I go do this, in addition to all of the metrics across the department. How are we doing with our uptimes? How are we doing with our people? How are we doing with financial, like all the big components? I hold everybody accountable to make sure there's an orchestration of metrics that tell and report a good story on and truthful story, not just good, but truthful on where we're doing well, where we're not doing so well, and making sure that there's plans to make things better. And then just because of, I think, my tenure and willingness to take on anything, I'm kind of a safety net. So if something gets thrown up that's really important that nobody knows how to tackle, it usually lands on my plate. And then I figure it out, discuss it with people, make sure there's the right people and resources to make sure it doesn't fall out of view. So that's what I do.
Nice.
And I teach and mentor a lot of people. They come in and how does this work, right? Going back to 7, 8 years ago, I built something and it's still running well. And I document it and teach them how to use it. And then they're off and running and they've increased their skill set. And it moves some process off my plate.
Gotcha.
Okay.
And what would you say, like, what type of person does well in that position?
Great question. So I think a lot of the qualities that you have to have in this position is, number one, you have to know how to talk to people, right? You have to know how to flex in the situation. So if you're in a meeting that's very tense, you need to know how to listen very, very carefully to multiple signals that are coming in, the words that are said, how they're said, and the body language of the person saying them, right? You got to understand those things. So you got to train yourself. Like, what does it mean when, somebody raises their voice? What does it mean when they go quiet? There's unsurety in some things. I'm making an emotional decision and I don't want to deviate from it. I'm not looking for ideas, right? You may not hear those words, but if you assess those, so you got to be able to be flexible in the situation and know when to push and when not to push. Leadership is a big factor. I've been blessed with some fantastic leadership coaching, and something that I have learned is hard conversations are only deemed hard because you attach emotion to them. So I'm not saying be a cold person, but Kaysen, if you were working for me and you weren't performing, I have to separate Kaysen from the behavior, right? So you got to be able to do that kind of thing. So Kaysen, you're not hitting the mark. I love working with you. And, I'm not doing the sandwich technique or anything, but I'm separating Kaysen and the person that I like and work with and I believe in, and I'm correcting a behavior because they're two different things and you have to separate the two. I think that's a core quality of a good leader, is to separate those two so that you keep the relationship and you motivate and inspire to correct behavior and add new ones that add value. That's one. You have to not be fearful of learning something. Right? I've never ever said, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to do that. When I see a problem and I'm assigned something, I've never backed down and said, I don't know how to do that. Instead I'll say, let me look into that and I'll get back to you in the next day or two. Right? And I'll go study it up and say, okay, here's my initial assessment. I got to go learn how to do this and this. Then I can deliver on X, Y, and Z. Right? Look for ways to deliver value, not for ways to deflect responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying go do everything that everybody isn't doing, right? You're not doing other people's jobs, But when something lands in your arena, don't be scared to go learn something. Don't be scared to say, hey, let me get back to you on this one. I don't have an answer right now, right? These are different ways of saying, I have no clue how to do what you want me to do, but I'm going to go figure it out. And sometimes with certain leaders, even that is a better answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for trusting me with this. I have no clue how to do it, but I'm going to figure it out. So give me a day or two and let me get back with you. Sometimes there are leaders that say, that is the mentality I want. I want to no fear, go get stuff done. So I don't have to go find another person to do it. Now, those are some of the biggest qualities that I've seen that have helped me in the type of position that I'm in. Now, my position, I also feel has been a building block position. So to your point, Muhammad, I'm building those bricks up. Lots of experience. Like, you have to know how to handle tough situations. You have to know how to handle, successes and promote your team rather than you, even if you were the one that did it, right? There's many times where I will congratulate a team and they look at me like, we didn't do anything, right? And I look at them and we both know it, but I promote it because they're my team, right? What does that do? They're motivated to do more later because they know I'm going to stand up for them. I can be a trusted and reliable person to them. So those are some of the qualities you got to have as you get up into leadership. You need to be trusted. You need to be respected more than being liked. And that's a hard thing for a lot of people to understand. It was hard for me. I wanted to be liked more than I wanted to be respected, which means I may have to make a tough call and you may not like it, but you respect the decision that we're going and we're all going together. We succeed together, but we also fail together. And I will take the initial blame for the failure. You won't, right? I will take the heat. And when we win, you will get the accolades, right? A lot of people think that leadership is not that, and that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. I just wanted to emphasize or return to the quick point you said. Oh, the leadership is very great, but I really the point that caught my mind more was when you're being assigned a task and you have no idea what it is. There's different approaches to take. The failure approach, in my opinion, is, oh, I don't know that. No, that's not me. Someone else. Just the other day in work, there's in our Tamaki group chat, a person released a message saying, hey, does anyone know how to code in Modbus or any understand the language of Modbus? And I looked at it and I was like, Modbus, that word, I've heard about it before, but I have no idea what this whole message is hinting about. And there was like a 12 document PDF page, and I read through it, but I still have no idea what it is. Now, I couldn't step up because of my just place and experience and be like, oh yeah, I know this, or I can learn this in 2 days, because I also don't want to, bite more than I can chew. But I waited for the person to step up and be like, oh, yep, that's my thing, that I know how to do that, because we have like one person in the whole company that knows Modbus, one or two, but the other person was, I think, in another country or something. So as I was researching Modbus, PLC language, and what is it, and just the very fundamentals of it, the person finally came up after like a 3-hour message, and in like a second I texted him. I was like, oh, hey, I want to learn this with you. And he was like, okay, that was pretty quick. Do you know anything about Modbus or PLCs or anything? I was like, well, I'm infrastructure engineer. PLCs is all automation engineer. I'm still making my way through covering both areas, but I still have a lot to learn in the infrastructure side, which is servers, applications, and stuff. Yep. So the automation side I'm still catching up to that. And he was like, I think this is like a domain kind of thing. I think you're in the infrastructure, you're trying to get on the PLC, and Modbus is a very specific thing. I love the enthusiastic here. I love that you're trying to learn new things, but there's lots of fundamentals. I guess once you start learning the PLC stuff, you can come to me now. I can train you on Modbus. And I bookmarked his message, and I was like, I don't know how much time it would take me, but hopefully not much. But I'm working my way through PLCs. Once I complete it, I'm come back to Modbus. And then when the next Modbus project comes, which
Yep.
he was like, we get a project like once every 5 years or something. I was like, well, the next 5 years, I'm gonna be the guy. And he was like, well, great for you, man.
He
So,
gave you the path, right? I mean,
yes,
your enthusiasm got you a path.
yes.
So that was the value you got from him. So now it's up to you, right? So now your actions are your own. Hold yourself accountable to that plan. And if that's the door you want to go through, you've now set it and the door's waiting for you. That's awesome.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thanks.
I think another thing is sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit, and sometimes,
Yep.
we, in most cases we can do more than we think we can. And there's several things, when I started my job where, I'd look at it and be like, yeah, I don't know how to do this. I've never seen this before. But I've learned that as I've taken more time to kind of think about it and figure it out myself, I, it allows you to build that problem solving skill. And
Hmm.
I found out, man, I can do a lot more than I thought I could. I've picked up a lot more than I thought. And so I mean, I like what you mentioned, don't just, first thing you say, I can't do that, but, really see if you can figure it out yourself.
Absolutely. Yep. It's a good mentality to have.
Awesome. Final words, final messages.
Oh, man. I think we talked about all the good stuff. This was a great discussion.
Yeah.
You
I
know, if
hate
I
for
was
it to end.
I was to anchor anything, it's, don't be careful of paralyzing yourself because of fear of the unknown, right? We don't know what's going to happen with your careers or the direction or the economy or whatever. And there's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, a lot of that FUD out there that can suppress what you want to go accomplish and succeed with in life. Um, don't let the FUD get in the way, right? Take action, take it consistently, and exercise those mental and emotional muscles that will help you get where you want to go. I think that's, one of the last things I'd leave it, because everything kind of attaches to that. Because once you start taking consistent action on something, things happen. It's inevitable.
Awesome. Well, that was great advice, and it was such a privilege to have you on the podcast today
Yes.
and talk more, and pick your brain. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you.